Welcome to the AB Business Biz podcast. I'm your Jena. How are you today, ma'am?
Great, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. First, let's get started. What is your business?
So I have started my own business. It's called Jena Coaching and Consulting. And what I do is I work with people that need help either growing their business, growing in leadership, or need help with other challenges that they're facing in their lives.
What inspired you to start this business?
Also a great question. When I worked in the corporate world in various sales and marketing positions for over 20 years. And one of the things that was always challenging for me is how I helped people. It was always through the lens of an organization. And I wanted to be able to help people differently. And so as I was going through my career, I decided I would take a look at coaching and see how I could help people outside of organizations succeed within the organization.
Do you still work in your corporate work, or did you completely quit that?
Yeah, I completely left over 5 years ago. I've been doing my own business for over 5.5 years now.
What made you take that big step to quit the corporate world and start your own business?
Yeah, that's it. It's a gigantic step. And it was just something that I decided I was going to try. And I figured if it didn't work out, if I wasn't successful, I would go back to work in corporate. But I figured it was about the time. My kids were getting a little bit older. They needed me more at home. I traveled a lot for my work. I traveled in my last role about 85 to 90% of the time. So I wasn't here very much. And so that was also one of the reasons why I took a look at that, because I wanted to spend more time with my family. And I decided, you know what? Let's go for it.
Yeah. How'd you attract your first clients to your business?
Yeah, that's through service, honestly. When I started to learn how to coach, I'd worked in corporate, so I had coached people for many years. But when I coach now, it's very different than how I did before. And so it was a great opportunity for me to learn through doing. And so what attracted my first clients was me reaching out to people and offering free coaching sessions, complimentary sessions. And we would do work and they would get great results. And then they were like, hey, how can we continue doing this? And so I just built them as clients.
Okay. When do you say was a moment that your business really took off, that you realized this is something that can really work out?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it was probably year 3, and year 3 for me, I started this business in 2019. So that was kind of through the pandemic, and the pandemic was really scary for my business because I was like, oh no, what's going to happen? But what it actually created was more time for people to really think about their lives. They wanted to grow. They had more time than ever to work on personal development. And so they would, they wanted to coach.
Yeah.
And then as people started going back to work, I was worried again, oh no, am I going to be able to get clients? Because now all my clients are going back to work and getting busy. And it was through that change when I was able to do that effectively that I'm like, okay, I've got this. I know what to do to grow my business. I know what it takes. All I have to do is do the work.
Is there a specific life lesson you learned in your corporate world which really helped this business and where it is today?
I think all the failures that I had in corporate world really helped me here and helps me with my clients. I lead various leadership groups, and one of the people that worked for me in the corporate world ended up being in my leadership group. And I would talk all the time in my leadership group about things that I did incorrectly, even with this employee. And that employee was Jena, you don't have to be so honest. And I'm like, no, but that's how we learn. We learn through the setbacks, the mistakes. And to me, I think I'm not proud of all of them. Some of them are embarrassing, right? Yeah. And they make me the leader that I am, and being vulnerable about it helps me show other people and help them see what they can do in their leadership differently.
Is there any setback or failure which really helped this business grow? Because I believe each failure leads to success.
Yes, I completely agree with that. There have been so many. Yeah. How do I pick just one? Yeah. I do have one in mind, though. When I first started coaching, it was probably within year 1.5, year 2. One of the companies that I had worked with prior asked me to come in and do some training for them. And I thought I had done everything correct. Him and I worked together on what they wanted to achieve, all of that. And when it came down to delivery, I remember asking his teams, like, hey, what do you want to get out of our session today? And based on the answers they had, it was really clear to me that they were unclear what we were doing there. And so there was like a mismatch, and I think it didn't, it was okay, but it wasn't great because the expectations weren't met. And like I said, I thought I had worked that out, but it taught me to work with people differently, especially if I'm working with one person and then working within the team. And I do that quite a bit in corporations. I'm making sure, what is the communication from you to your team about what's going to happen? And so I complete that communication loop a bit further, and that's due to that learning that I had from that.
Yeah, so you mentioned COVID a little bit back ago, and I believe the world is always changing. And leadership is always changing. How do you make sure your service is always valuable in a rapid changing world?
Yeah. So with leadership, it's always interesting because I don't think leadership changes that rapidly. Okay. Are there new leadership techniques and new ways of talking about it? Yes, absolutely. And I stay up to date on that. But really, I think it comes back to the foundational basics, right? How well are we listening? How well are we coaching our people? How well are we managing agreements? And how are we handling difficult conversations, right? It's the same basic things, and it could be the new leadership word, but at the same time, it's still the same stuff underneath. And so that's what I really focus on, are those foundational challenges, because I just wrapped up a group today, and one of the leaders in the group, she said to me, I thought I was a really great leader before I joined this group. Yeah. And she goes, and I thought I didn't have much more to learn. And she goes, now I see that there's so much more for me to learn, and there's so much more depth that I can create in my own leadership. Yeah,
so you obviously have a very busy schedule. How does a typical day look like for you?
Is there a typical day for me? Yeah, so there is. I wake up, I do my morning routine, and my morning routine often looks like walking my dogs or taking care of myself, like through meditation or other things like that. And then I'm usually getting my kids off to school, and then my day starts. So sometimes, I work with clients throughout the day until about 3 o'clock, and then I start to make time for my kids to come home from school, do homework, transition to other sports and other things that we're doing. And then sometimes I coach at night. Like, some clients can only work with me at night, but a lot of them work with me during the day. So it just depends on the schedule. But yeah, I'm working with clients. I'm reaching out to people, connecting with people, serving them. Some days I'll sit around for, half hour and just make a list of people that I'm thinking about, and people maybe that I've coached before, and I'm thinking about what we coached about, and I'm thinking, do I have a new resource I can send them, right? And so just sitting and being with my clients, even if I'm not there physically with them or on Zoom with them, I'm thinking about them even in my downtime.
Yeah. So there's tons of leaders right now in the world, presidents, CEOs. In your eyes, who's like a really good leader right now?
Oh,
Yeah.
this might be the toughest question you've asked me. Ooh. Gosh. You know, as a public figure, it's interesting because I don't get caught up in how they lead. One of the people that, because you said right now, this disqualifies my answer, but I want to go with this anyway.
Yeah.
For me, Steve Jobs was an amazing visionary leader. What I see with Steve Jobs, though, is like he was really difficult to work with internally in the organization, not really emotionally intelligent, right? And so that's why I'm struggling with the question, because for me, leaders that are doing really good in their craft are often challenged in the emotional intelligence part, and people that are handling emotional intelligence really well are sometimes not as visionary. And so for me, it's always a mixed bag of that. But let me do some more thinking back here, and I may have an answer for you by the time we're done.
Yeah, so you mentioned emotional intelligence. Can you tell me how leadership and emotional intelligence kind of go hand in hand?
Yeah, like to me, that's all leadership is in many ways. We can lead teams through vision. We can lead teams through different strategies. However, if we're not able to hear our customer or hear our team members, if we're not able to help them feel valued in our organization, to me, that is a missing component, and it really detracts from the work. So for me, they're hand in hand. I would say most of my work in leadership is emotional intelligence packaged through a different lens, right? Because if I just say, oh, we're going to talk again about emotional intelligence today, people kind of like, ugh. But instead I'm like, oh, we're going to be talking about how we lead with compassion today, or we're going to be talking about how we more actively listen to the people that we're working with, or today we're going to talk about how we build trust, right? And so I take, because emotional intelligence to me is a beast. And I think a lot of people don't know how to grow in emotional intelligence because there's so many facets and it's so complex. And so there's not like one thing you can do to become more emotionally intelligent. It's a lot of things that we have to do.
Yeah, so how would you define good leadership?
For me, remember the client I was just telling you about that said, hey, I now realize I still have so much growth to do. To me, that's the essence of a great leader. Someone that's really self-aware, willing to do the work, willing to try new things, can acknowledge their people beautifully for the good work, that can deliver feedback in a great way that's meaningful. And, I think there will always be some challenge in receiving negative feedback, but when we know that it's there with good intention from our leaders, it's easier to handle. So I think all of those things make a great leader, but that self-awareness piece is one of the most important pieces, because if we're not aware that we aren't a good listener, and I mean, there were times in my career where I was not as self-aware, and my leadership was challenged at those times.
So you mentioned your clients a lot. Do you have any like funny or even any client stories which you'd like to share?
Sure.
Take your time. You can move on to the next question if you would like.
Funny client story. I think, you know, what's interesting, maybe it's not funny, but to me, what's interesting about my clients is figuring out the pace in which I have to work with them. And sometimes, and it can be a little funny at times, because if I think they're ready and I'm pushing them kind of from behind, sometimes I can push too fast, or sometimes I'm not pushing fast enough. So it's always trying to find that space. And sometimes I talk to my clients about the flame of coaching, right? High flame means that I'm really digging in and not softening things much. And some clients are ready for that, or some clients think they're ready for that. And then they'll be like, geez, Jena, oh my, that's a tough question, or that's really direct. And I usually ask permission before I do that. But it can be kind of funny. And I'm like, oh, sorry, I pushed you over the edge, didn't I? I'm like, okay, come on back. We'll slow it down and we'll work, you know, a little bit differently. So that can be kind of funny. The great thing is I try to create a safe place where that can be a funny experience versus, you know, an experience that feels dangerous or really difficult for them.
Yeah, so what's a very common challenge that a lot of your clients face?
I would say most of them are looking to go to the next level and they don't know how to get there. I had a client once that was telling me, they were like, I really want to get promoted. And I said, great. What feedback are you getting? And they said that they needed to be more strategic. And I said, what does that mean inside of your organization? And they said, I don't know, because I've been trying everything. Like, I'm doing all these things. I think I'm being strategic. And I said, right, why don't you go back and ask your leader? Like, get some more understanding. And the leader simply wanted this leader that I was working with to ask more questions in big meetings. That was being strategic. Now, my client was trying everything to be strategic. And it brings me to the point of the challenge that I think most of my clients have is they are moving so fast to try to get to the next level that they're not slowing down to think about the things that I show them. Why don't you go ask what strategic means? You know, we're just, and I mean, I did this too when I was in corporate. I just was like, okay, I'm going to figure it out. Okay, this week I'm going to do this to be strategic. This week I'm going to do this. And yet I was still coming up empty. And so was the client. And so for me, everyone is busy. Everyone has so much to do, and they're all racing to get it all done. And when we can slow down to see, okay, what actually needs to happen, what needs to be done so that I can create the next steps beautifully, and I don't have to backtrack because I didn't, you know, I forgot that this was happening, or I didn't account for that, and we've moved 10 steps forward and now we have to move 10 steps back to start all over again. So that's, I call it slowing down to speed up. I would say that's the most common challenge. People are just bam, bam, bam in such a hurry. They're not stopping to think the impact of their words, what's happening in their own leadership. They're just moving and going.
Yeah. What would you say is a really important trait for leadership that you should have?
I think that self-awareness piece, like if I were to point at one thing, right? I mean, they're all incredibly important, but without that self-awareness piece, like we have to be aware that we're not a good listener. We have to be aware that we're moving too fast. We have to be aware that, you know, what we're doing isn't working before we can change it. And when we get into the change, I think that's the great part. Like, again, that willingness to try things. That would be my second one. If I can sneak two in.
You can sneak as much as you want.
Okay, great.
So, you said slowing down to speed up.
Yes.
So, can you elaborate on that a little bit more? I'm sorry. But
no, it's a great question, because every time I talk to my clients about it, they resist it, right? Because they're like, no, I can't slow down. I have more to do. And so for me, slowing down to speed up is, let's say I'm in charge of integrating a new strategic initiative in my team. Well, there's always this like, okay, we got to do it. And we jump in and we start doing the work. Slow down to speed up means that we're just going to slow down for a few minutes at the beginning of the project and really reflect, okay, what do we really need to do? What is going to make this successful? What are the markers for success? How am I going to be looking at this? Who am I going to get on the team to do this work? It's reflecting and asking yourself these questions. So then it's like, okay, now I'm clear that it's time to get to work. And the other thing for me, slow down to speed up, is bringing people along with us. Sometimes we can be, as leaders, we can be way too far out in advance of the rest of our team. And we're leaving them behind. And so finding ways to bring them along, instead of me moving ahead and then trying to pull them, like, we're slowing down and building momentum together. So then we're just all running in the same direction, and then we're moving faster.
It's actually really funny, because I'm in a developing student leaders class right now in my school.
Yes.
And my teacher's always like, after you do this activity, you have to reflect. And I always
thought,
what's the point of it? Can you just go to more leadership stuff? What's the point of reflecting?
Yes.
That really changed my perspective, because I was like, I never thought reflecting was an important aspect of leadership.
Yes.
I was like, let's just do more leadership activities. What's the point of reflecting?
Yes. I love that for you, because it will change how you do everything, and not just leadership stuff. Like, apply it everywhere. Tonight, as you were arriving, I was helping my son with his schoolwork. I haven't had a moment to reflect yet, but I was really frustrated with him in those moments, right? And I probably said some less than loving things to try to get him, getting a hold of his homework. And but I will reflect on that, and I'll clean it up too. I'll go back and apologize to him, letting him know that Mom was super frustrated. And he already knows, but I'm still going to say it, because I want him to know that that's not how I want to be. It's not how I want to lead in my family, right? And so that reflection piece, it's incredibly important. So I highly recommend you doing that. And I think that's the thing, the paradigm that you just talked about, right? It's like, okay, next. And we have a drive for that as human beings. It's normal and natural. So to be pulling ourselves back just to slow us down a little bit, to go like, okay, you don't have to reflect for hours. Sometimes it takes me like 2 or 3 seconds to reflect. But I also, you asked me about my day. I don't book my calls back to back, because guess what I'm doing?
Reflecting.
I'm reflecting. And then I'm looking back at the conversation, because anytime in a coaching conversation, you'll say something and I have a choice. Do I ask this question or this question? And that choice takes the conversation in different directions. And so sometimes I'll reflect and I'll see like, oh wow, we didn't address any of that over there. I'm going to write a well-worded email to say, hey, we didn't address this. Where are you at with this? Or I'll send a resource, or I'm just thinking about other things, like evaluating myself. How slowed down was I? Did I do too much talking?
Yeah.
You know, so I'm evaluating a lot of different things, and it doesn't take me very long to do it anymore because I practice it so much. But it does take practice.
It's actually really changed my perspective, because I thought the reflection piece was just for how to add more grades in our grade book.
Well, maybe, but there's also a benefit to it, right? I mean, when I go to coaching school still, and I've been in the same coaching school for 4 years, so I know the coach pretty well. And I tell people, right, I'm there to learn, but I'm also there, I play this game while I'm there. So other people are getting coached, so they're bringing their problems forward, and she's coaching them. And as they're talking about the problem, I'm thinking, how would I coach this person?
Yeah.
What would I say? And then when my coach starts giving the response, then I'm comparing my answer to hers.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that her answer is right or my answer is right. I just want to see, like, how closely related are our answers or our responses or the direction that we take the conversation, because I learn from that. And so while it's not reflecting, it is like being with the content in a very different way that allows for more learning for me.
Yeah. So would you say reflection might be another trait, like the ability to always reflect?
Yeah. I mean, gosh, we'll have a list as long as our arms by the time we're done.
So you tell your leaders how to manage conflict.
Yeah. Great question. Very carefully, right?
Yeah.
You know, I use a 3-step process to really help us think about conflict. So conflict for me is usually a difficult conversation that needs to occur, right? So I want to be thinking about what needs to happen in the conversation, right? So let's say you were one of my team members, and you had not prepared well for a presentation. Okay? And I need to now have a conversation with you. So what needs to happen? I need to set up a meeting with you to talk about the feedback and ask you what occurred, right? The second step is what's the outcome? What do I want to have as the outcome? Well, I honestly want you to leave the conversation feeling more empowered. I want you to understand, you know, what was occurring for me and why you're getting the feedback. And so it goes a lot deeper than just, okay, I've got to tell him this, right? It's like, I want you to leave with clarity about what you need to do next time, right? And so I literally write these answers out on my paper. Like, I want you to be clear. I want this to be a helpful conversation, right? And then number 3 is, who do I need to be in this conversation? And I would say 99.99999% of the time, slowed down is always on my list, because I need to be slowed down in a difficult conversation. Now, with different people, I may need to be different, right? If I know you like to receive feedback very direct and not, you know, taking my time, I know I need to be direct, right? So I want to be thinking about that ahead of time, and like literally I'm writing it down direct on my paper, right? I'm like, okay, I'm thinking about you, how you're going to receive this, and what's the best way to bring the message. And that's a good reminder to me about how I want to be in the meeting.
So you mentioned different people, but there's a lot of your clients might work in different industries. How do you manage people who work in very different industries? And is it a huge differentiation, or is it similar?
I don't see the differentiation, right? I mean, to me, being a leader of your household, being a leader in your corporation, being a leader in your community or church or temple, you know, to me, it's all the same. And so I coach people in different industries. Even on the business side, I do a lot of work in the industry that I used to do, that I used to work in. And that's because a lot of people know me and know my work. And I do some consulting work there. But even that, it's more about coaching, right? To me, it's like how, what's happening in the business that's keeping you from growing?
Yeah.
I want to be asking questions rather than saying, oh, I understand your business. I understand what needs to happen. Here's what you need to go do. Because in my opinion, we get a lot of consultants going out to companies and telling people what to do, and good portion of that doesn't get implemented because people don't believe in it. But when we can slow them down and do more coaching than consulting, and still helping them with some of the consulting pieces like ideas, but then finding a way to coach them for them to synthesize their own ideas, they buy into that more than me telling them what to do. I mean, think about this for a moment. Have you ever had a problem and you start talking to either your friends or your parents about it, and they're like, I know what you need to do. Here's what you do. And already you're like, right? That's that resistance that I'm talking about. It happens in corporations as well. So we want to manage that. And I manage that by helping people create their own ideas.
Yeah. That's actually really thinking. I was telling my friend of something I had a problem with when it came to stuff, and I heard an idea, and I was like, this might have been one of the worst ideas I've ever heard.
Right.
And I just texted him like, I like that's a terrible idea. I'm not gonna go ask someone else. But that's reflecting. I probably should have been a better leader at that time.
Well, it's a great thing to reflect on, right?
Yeah.
To me, maybe not.
Yeah.
In that moment, my experience of it is, and I go to my sisters, right? I have 4 sisters, so I've got an answer somewhere with the sisters. And when I do that, and they cut me off and they tell me what I should do, or even if they don't cut me off, if they let me speak and then they tell me what to do, I may already have the same idea, but because they told me to do it, I resist it. No, I resist it. I don't want them to tell me. Like sometimes, and I think this is a great question. I use this in coaching my family. I use it in coaching sometimes my clients, and I teach my clients to do this with their team members. Someone will come in your office or in your team's room complaining. Sometimes they just want to be heard. They don't want to be told what to do. And so sometimes I will just ask, I'll say, are you just wanting to vent, or do you want to work on a solution with me? And a lot of times they're like, no, I just want to vent. And I'm like, okay, vent away. And then they leave and I don't offer a solution. And it's really great because they get what they need, right? And they don't need me to solve their problem. And as a leader, I think this is one of the toxic traits of leaders. We become leaders because we have all the answers, right? In our individual contribution roles. When we become a leader, we think we have to still have all the answers. And so when that person comes in and vents, we think it's our job to fix it and take care of it, when in fact, it may not be our job. Actually, and we can just relax in that. Actually
really different, because you said when one of your sisters gives you an idea, you resist it. When someone gives me an idea, I was like, and I have the same idea, I'm always going to go forward with it. And I never like taking self-blame. So if they're the idea, I'll say, and why'd you make me do that? So I'm never responsible. And that's
I may still do the idea because it was my idea to start with. It's just there's some resistance in it right in that moment, right? And we want to lower the resistance at all times in our leadership. We want people to come on board and move faster, right? And so that for me is like one of the ways we can slow down to speed up is by reducing that resistance and just letting people kind of figure things out. You know, I love asking, well, what do you want to do about this? You know, given all that, what do you want to create? And my clients will often say, I don't know. And I'm like, great. And they're like, and they do that. They're like, well, no, it's not great. And I said, no, it's great. I said, now, if I were going to give you $1 million for a solution that you could offer, what would the solution be right now?
Me? Yeah.
And then they come up with ideas, right? And I'm like, okay, now you do know something, right? But we always say we don't know because we don't know maybe the right answer. But the reality is we never know the right answer. We just have to kind of go for it and see and adjust. And I think that's where people get tripped up.
So you mentioned toxic traits back. What are some traits you think which limit leaders from like seeing their...
That lack of self-awareness, so important. Another thing that limits them is, you know, talking down to people, not having people feel valued in the organization. Oh gosh, the list is long, right? I mean, it's leaving people on their own, not helping them along in the process. And a lot of leaders do it. I don't call them leaders, I call them managers. I'm very specific about my language there because not all managers are leaders and many leaders manage. Like, to me, you know, I learned this from a coach that I know. It's like the perfect ratio in leadership is 1/3 of the time we're managing, so directing, telling people what needs to be done. 1/3 of the time we're in leadership, right? So this is inspiring people to the vision, you know, really bringing people together, collaborating, you know, that's what I mean by leadership in that way. And then 1/3 of the time we're coaching. So, you know, trying to get people to come to their own ideas, right? And so it's like that perfect, like 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 is like a great ratio. If you looked at your leadership over a month time, you know, it's like, am I spending 1/3 of the time doing this, 1/3 of the time doing this, and 1/3 of the time doing this? And most people spend a lot of time in managing and not enough time in leadership, like really inspiring people to the vision. And I just ran this exercise with a group. I had one of the team members say he does 5% coaching, right? Instead of 1/3. Should be up in 30%. And he's like, 5%. I'm like, okay. Right? So now we see something, a possibility, right? Now I'm not saying he has to change things. Maybe that's not great for his team. But I imagine he'll go faster, further if he's able to incorporate more coaching and more leadership.
You said 1/3, 1/3, 1/3.
Yes.
So how do you like help people become more leaders and more managing? Like, what's some steps you take to fill out that 1/3?
Yeah. So I teach them how to coach very specifically, because I think when people are getting coached, right, they're not thinking about the process and what's happening. And I invite people to really like experience coaching through receiving it, but also experience it just how I was telling you about the coach that I am like looking at, right? I'm like, I'm receiving the coaching, even though she's not coaching me. I have similar problems in my business to what she's coaching, but I'm also looking at it through the lens of what is she doing as a coach that's helping this person. And I'll say that to people. I'm like, what happens in our coaching calls, right? What happens here? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, great. Let's slow down and look at it, right? And then we slow down and they're like, oh, you ask a lot of questions. You point to something, but you don't make me see it, right? And that's one of the things about coaching. It's not about me being right or them being wrong. It's just about me pointing in a direction and opening their eyes to the possibility that there's something more for them to take a look at there. And sometimes people take a look and they're like, yeah, no, I'm not doing it. And I'm like, okay, great. And then we have a talk about what kind of impact that's going to have on their leadership.
Yeah. So the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, has that always been your philosophy, or has it changed over time since you started the business?
No, it hasn't always been it certainly wasn't my philosophy when I was working.
Yeah.
Like, I was in a lot of management, not a lot of leadership.
Yeah.
I learned that a couple of years ago, and it really made a lot of sense to me. Yeah. And so, it hasn't been my philosophy all along. I learned new things too in leadership, and I'm willing to see it, and being willing to know that I don't know everything about leadership. I mean, leadership is a complex, huge topic. Yeah. But I am willing to slow down and take a look. I am willing to see something that I haven't seen before.
Yeah. So, collaboration. I want to move on to that space. How important is collaboration in leadership?
I think it depends.
Yeah.
But I think it's pretty darn important. I mean, some things that you do in leadership doesn't require a lot of collaboration. But quite frankly, most of the time, as we start moving up in the ranks and really start becoming leaders, right? We're working with teams, cross-functional. Those cross-functional teams are working with other cross-functional teams within the business. And so helping people find ways of working together when there's challenges, helping them find ways to collaborate more effectively, or to be able to listen to each other better, or to see each other's points of view better. To me, that's all collaboration, and so it becomes really important as you go higher up in the organizations.
Are there any instances where you think collaboration might not impact the business, or maybe like kind of like reduce it, or like make a plan worse in a way?
I can't think of an example off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I mean, even me, right? Yeah. I'm the only one in my business. So you would think there's no collaboration. Yeah. It's not true. I collaborate all the time with other coaches. So I have coaches that I work with on accountability. Yeah. I have coaches that I stay in touch with where we just share stories. I have coaches where we do thinking sessions. I have coaches that I'm being coached by, right? And so to me, even though my business is a single person, I'm collaborating all the time. I'm collaborating with my clients. I'm collaborating with other coaches. And so I can't think of a time where it wouldn't be at least somewhat important.
Yeah, so this aspect of things. Can you move on to marketing? How do you market your business so more clients join and have a constant flow of revenue?
Yeah, so I don't do a ton of marketing for my business. A lot of my business grows by word of mouth. Yeah. And that's because I serve people. I really focus on the service aspect rather than the marketing aspect. Now, I do things where, like, I have a newsletter, right, that I've just started actually like 2 weeks ago, where I'm sharing leadership tips. Yeah. I'm doing that because I want to bring people in closer and serve more, provide more value. I have a podcast where I'm talking about the struggles that women in particular, and men struggle with the same thing, but we are two other women. We're talking about it from a woman's perspective about how we manage it all, and when things don't go according to plan, how do we pivot? How do we because I don't think anything has ever gone to plan, like big things, right? Like, so I think there's great opportunity to just bring people, like the podcast for me is all about making things real for women, and also letting them know that they're not alone, right? So that's service in another way. I reach out to people and just connect with them, ask them how they're doing, how this is going. And sometimes they're like, yeah, I'm having a lot of challenge. And I'm like, hey, do you want to jump on a call?
Yeah.
And I offer a complimentary call to help them. And sometimes they work with me and sometimes they don't. And it's all good. Right? So a lot of my marketing is by doing. I'm in action. I'm getting people on my calendar that I would love to coach. And I talk to them and I coach them. And sometimes I invite them back for another complimentary session. And then we do more work. And then sometimes they're like, Jena, how do we do more of this? And I'm like, great. And we talk about it. Other times they're like, I'm all good. I've got everything settled. And I'm like, great, go, like have fun, take care of it. Right. And so, but because I do that, like a lot of times, even those people that don't become my clients, they'll still recommend someone else that will become a client because they've been served by me. So that's how I run my business. It's a very service orientated philosophy. And it feels really good inside of my heart to be able to work with people in that way.
How do you manage all your time with your kids, the podcast, newsletter, your business? You have 2 dogs as well?
Yes, yeah. Sometimes not very well, honestly. I can be really vulnerable about that. But, I think for me, it's getting clear on my schedule. As I was mentioning to you before, I stop work around 3 on most days. And that's because my kids are getting off the bus and I don't have to be available to them, but it's helpful. And it makes me feel better knowing that they're getting their homework done and getting everything handled and getting a healthy snack after school or whatever that might look like, right? And so, and do I coach at 3 p.m.? Sometimes, yes, I do. Like today I was on a call when they came home from school. And that's because I have a short week this week. Schedule's condensed because of the Thanksgiving holiday. So I have to squish more work into less days. So this week, I won't be managing my schedule as I normally do. But I know it's a short-term thing, right? And then next week, my schedule will be back to normal.
So is there anything you would do differently if you were to start your business from scratch? What would you do?
Thank you. For me, it would be letting go of the fears that I have inside of me about what people are thinking about me offering my services. As I was talking to you before, I run a service-based business, and I'm really, like, when I reach out to people to see if I can help them, I really don't have like a feeling like, oh, they're going to be my client, or I'm trying to get them as a client. I'm just like, how can I help this person? And sometimes I get too worried that they're going to think that I'm trying to get them as a client and I'm not serving as powerfully. So if I were to do it all over again, I would love to be able to let go of that sooner, because I still have some of that coming up inside of me. Oh, what are they going to think if I ask them to a coaching conversation? But now I'm more comfortable with it because I know it serves. And if people don't want that, that's totally great as well.
So is there any advice you would give to the person like 5 to 10 years ago?
To me? Oh, there's so much advice. I've got a lot coming up. I think for me, I would have left corporate sooner to start my own business because it's just so rewarding. But I was very fearful, can I do it? Will I make it? There were lots of those questions floating around in my brain. And so I think I would start that sooner. I think I would tell myself to be more self-aware. I also have been diagnosed with ADHD recently, and I didn't know I had ADHD all this time, right? And so I would tell myself to get checked by a doctor for this, right? Because it makes things more challenging for me. And I've used systems to figure out how to work through that, but the awareness of it has made it harder and easier in some ways. So there's that piece that I would say, oh my gosh, you know, like if you could get that figured out sooner, that would be great. I would do things differently with my kids, with my husband, right? There's so many things, but I think it's really all about, I really don't prescribe so much to follow your dreams at any cost. I really think that we need to, as human beings, I love the fact that we're able to, like, I love the fact that I'm doing something that I really love. It's still work. I just really love it, and I'm really passionate about it. But, you know, I'm not like, oh, go follow your dreams at any cost. But I do wish I had more of that in me and the confidence to really do more faster.
So we're going to go a little bit forward in the future.
Okay.
Where do you want to see your business in the next 5 to 10 years?
You know, I don't see it too different than it is today. I mean, financially, I could always make a little bit more money. But I make enough money now to handle everything that we need. I think I would like to be working with, you know, clients that continue to excite me, right? Here's the beautiful thing about coaching. It's the only profession that I know of where I get to grow as much as my clients, right? So through the reflection process, right? I'm learning and I'm growing after each coaching session. And so as I learn and grow, I will want to be working with clients that are in a different trajectory. And I don't know what that will look like, but it'll be a different trajectory than I'm on today, because I will be different in 5 to 10 years from now. And so, you know, working with those clients and just really getting more clear about who I want to be serving and how I want that to impact the world. You know, because I do want to leave positive change in the world.
Are there any significant milestones you want to hit in the future?
No. I know that sounds crazy as a coach, right? It's like, oh my gosh, you should have goals, and I do. I don't get too hung up on goals though. I get really hung up on what are the things that I need to do to hit goals, and that's where I focus my attention, right? So I know I need to be doing more of this type of work if I want to grow my business. I know I need to be doing more of this type of work if I want to become a better coach, get more experience as a coach, right? So I'm looking at it from those places. I mean, of course, I say no, but I have some answers, right? I want to become a better coach than I am today. I want to be more comfortable, like sitting in the silence with a client and letting them come up with their own solution than I am today. Because I can still jump in a bit, right? I want to, I would love to be doing it from a different part of the world, right? Like after my kids graduate and my husband retires, you know, maybe I don't do coaching from New Jersey. Maybe I do coaching from one of these beautiful locations that I've been to before, right? And so, you know, seeing what that would look like would be really fun as well.
Yes, so all these locations, is there a specific memory or moment you had in these locations which you think really impacted you to say, I want to make a business, or any moment?
I think all of them, honestly, because when I look at these, what this stands for is freedom. Right? And freedom financially, freedom emotionally. You know, some people work really hard to earn a lot of money and they go to fantastic places like this, but they can't really settle down and enjoy their time there and be really present. You know, in all of these places, I would say I struggled with being present, right? Like there were times when I'm on vacation, when I look at these pictures, they look beautiful and serene, but I can tell you I was probably on my phone on the beach, or handling something for work,
Yeah.
or making sure that email was taken care of. So all of them represent that for me, to be more present, to be in the space of the beauty and really taking it in for what it is, and to be able to marvel in that, right?
Yeah. So, is there any way you use to differentiate yourselves from other businesses? Because there's a lot of leadership coaches out there. How do you differentiate yourselves from other businesses?
I don't know that I do. I just serve, right?
Yeah.
I just keep serving, keep working with people, keep helping people. That's really what I'm up to in the world.
Yeah.
What they're all doing doesn't really matter to me.
Yeah.
I love sometimes looking at what they're doing because it gives me ideas about ways that I can be thinking about leadership differently. But I'm not really concerned about, oh no, here's another leadership coach. I'm like, great, we need more leadership coaches. Because coming back to your question when you were asking me, like, the leader, I struggle because I think we need better leadership around the world, right? In all positions, corporate, political, community, church, all of it. And so I'm like, more leadership coaches? Great. The world needs it.
Yeah. So, as this podcast is coming to an end, I always try to ask like a really fun question. So, who's your favorite artist and who's a musician, or in a way, that you really like to listen to?
So I just did a podcast on me and the ladies. There was a podcast episode that just aired a couple weeks ago that was called The Soundtrack of Our Lives. And if we could only listen to 5 songs for the next year, which 5 would they be and why? And my number 1 was Metallica. Okay. And we had to pick a song. So mine was the S&M version 2. Now I'm going to forget the name of the song. I could sing it for you, but I'm going to forget the name of the song. But I love Metallica. I think Metallica is one of those bands that is quite heavy on their lyrics, the meaning behind them. I think people just think of them as heavy metal and like thrash metal, and they're not singing about anything of value or importance. But their lyrics are really deep, and it has a lot of meaning. And so, and I love the musicality of it, especially, that they play with the San Francisco Symphony. You've got heavy metal and the symphony together. They just do some really cool, fun things. So they're one of my old school go-tos, right? No matter what I'm doing in my world, Metallica is always in a playlist for me.
So, do you want to plug any of your businesses or podcasts or anything to any of my viewers?
Oh, sure. Thank you. Thank you. So, my website is jenakinney.com, JenaKinney.com, and the podcast is It All Asterisk, and we can be found on Apple, Spotify, any kind of platform that you listen to your podcasts on. You can find it there. So I hope you do join us there and come in on the conversation about how to manage it all.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.